Good morning, great people. Welcome to another edition of Built in Buffalo One-on-One. How you doing, Bills Mafia? I'm Built in Buffalo President Lance Nelson, and today in this edition of One-on-One, I'm joined with former Bills center and current commentator Eric Wood. Eric, how you doing this morning, brother?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Lance?
Hey, we're doing great. My son got a good night of sleep, so I wasn't woken up. You have a couple kids, obviously, you know how that goes. So hopefully the family is all good today.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
First of all, congratulations on the hole in one, man. I feel like you've been talking about it all week, but I just wanted to ask, is that one of the things that you can talk about kind of forever? Are you ever going to get sick of talking about that one?
No, I won't. I don't think so, at least. Maybe until something else comes along that could be an equivalent, or maybe I get another one. But no, that was pretty special. I'm a golf junkie. I absolutely love it. I love so much about the sport. So to be able to get a hole in one at my favorite course with a bunch of buddies was truly special.
That's awesome. I'm a mathlete, not an athlete, so I don't have a very good golf game. I haven't sunk a birdie yet, but I'm still working towards that. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool moment. You got it on film, so that was also pretty special to kind of be able to carry that with you forever.
Yeah, we got the drive up on film. I wish the
Right.
shot was on film. That would have been even better. I've played so many rounds of golf and hit so many shots, first shots on par three. So it would have been a lot of wasted time in film if each and every one of those was filmed. But yeah, they got the drive up, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a special moment to capture, with your friends there. Um, a lot of people are talking about the NFL awards this morning, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I mean, first of all, Damar Hamlin coming back from, death basically on the field and playing in the NFL again. I thought that was enough to win comeback player of the year. And Joe Flacco ended up getting the award. Not that Joe's accomplishments were not great in their own right, but I kind of just want to get your thoughts on the comeback player of the year. And do you think Damar maybe would have been the pick there for you?
Yeah, he would have been. And they just need to set a precedent right now on which it's going to be. Is it a guy who comes back from not being very successful and then has a successful season? Or is it going to be a guy that comes back from catastrophic injury, illness, whatever it may be? They kind of set the precedent with Alex Smith a few years ago when he came back and had 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, but was able to come back and come back off that broken leg and all of the trials that came along with that. I actually had him on my podcast, What's Next with Eric Wood, and he talked about a lot of that journey. But at that point, he got the comeback player of the year. And so you thought, okay, this is more of a comeback from catastrophic injury. And sometimes it's both. So, sometimes it's Adrian Peterson coming off an ACL injury and then going for over 2,000 yards. So which is it? And it seems like the precedent was set that it's whoever overcomes the most, maybe not has the most successful season the following year. And so in that case, it would be Damar Hamlin. Okay, if we're going to set this as the precedent now, let's just keep it consistent. That would be my only gripe in this entire situation.
Sure, yeah. And I thought the same. I think that Damar was deserving. Joe obviously had a great comeback in his own right, but it wasn't really necessarily from anything other than a little bit of age and being a little bit phased out of the game. So yeah, Josh Allen with MVP. I don't again have a problem with Josh not winning it. I have a problem with him finishing fifth in the voting, and I just wanted to get your thoughts a little bit on what your thought about the MVP voting was, and how Josh is obviously much higher than the fifth most valuable player in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, he leads the league in total touchdowns, total yards, but I think a big point here is that the narrative from week 1 on was that Josh Allen has a turnover problem. Yes, he had 4 turnovers in the most watched Monday Night Football game in history to start the season. And he had 4 turnovers, the Bills lose. And I feel like right then it was set in stone that Josh Allen had this narrative with the media that could not be overcome last year. And, down the stretch, Josh played good football at times, especially with Joe Brady. They would just simply run the ball down team's throat if that's what the recipe was to win. And so stat padding wasn't quite there, although he still led the league in total yards and total touchdowns. But kind of at that midway point of the season where they're sitting there at 6-6, and I realize that's beyond midpoint, but before that final stretch, I think the narrative was already there that Lamar Jackson was going to win it because the Ravens were playing the most consistent football in the NFL. And then down the stretch, Lamar had a few good games, but statistically wasn't even close to Josh on the season. But look, this is always going to be a quarterback award unless something outrageous happens. And it's generally going to go to the quarterback of one of the 2-1 seeds if he has a pretty good season. Now, I'm a University of Louisville grad. I love Lamar Jackson. He's a great person. I am extremely proud for his upbringing and where he's come from, to be a 2-time MVP and be a guy that everyone said he couldn't play quarterback in college. So he comes to the University of Louisville to get that chance to play quarterback. He wins a Heisman Trophy, 2-time NFL MVP. Look, despite what I feel about Josh and his finish in the MVP race, I also want to say Lamar Jackson is well deserving, and you won't find a more refreshing person to be around.
Yeah, I think Lamar is a great person from, my way back perspective here. I obviously have no contact with him or anything, but to say the tie-in with Louisville is funny because I'm a big Syracuse University guy and grew up in the area of Syracuse. So I was glad that you got drafted by the Bills specifically because, I went from watching you kind of torment the ACC and Big East there and to now being able to root for you and watching and rooting for you to kind of dominate up front. So that was kind of cool. What would you say the biggest hurdle for you was transitioning from college to the NFL?
Well, first off, thank you for saying that. That means a lot. And two, I would say the biggest adjustment was just that everybody's good. There's never a game, even you could be playing one of the worst teams in the league, and you're still going to have really, really good players to go against, which is much different from college. In college, you could be playing, a school that's far inferior in budget and resources, and they just can't recruit the same level of players that other schools can. And so essentially you're going against guys during the game that aren't even as good as the people that you were going against in practice. And that's just not going to be the case in the NFL. Each and every week, you have to show up or you can be embarrassed. Everybody's good. Yes, there's different levels of NFL players, but everybody's good. And so you have to bring it every single week. But in turn, by doing that, you become better and better as a player, and you watch yourself improve along the way. I remember one of the best defensive tackles I went against in college was a guy out of the University of Kentucky. He was on the Bills practice squad at the time. So I'm going up against him every single day, and he's on our practice squad. But he was one of the best guys I went against the previous year in college. And so it's just a different animal when you get to the NFL as far as talent across the board.
Yeah, you got to play across from Kyle Williams, I guess, in some practices, right? So that was pretty special for you, I'm sure. So overall, 9-year career here with the Bills, really, pretty successful. I know you had up and downs, obviously, some injuries and things, but just the tenacious nature of your play style, I think, lent itself a little bit to that. But what does it mean to you, and what is it like to remain here and be still a part of the Buffalo community and the Bills organization now, calling games on the radio and still doing everything you do kind of with the Buffalo Bills?
Well, it means a lot. I mean, it was a privilege to be able to play my entire career in one city and in Buffalo. And look, when my career ended with the neck injury, I wasn't ready to not be around football anymore. So to be able to hop in the broadcast booth and still be a part of the organization in a small way and still be around each and every game day, to have my foundation still in Buffalo and spend a lot of time up there, it means a lot to me. I mean, this weekend I'm heading up to Buffalo for an appearance and a dinner on Saturday. And so I get back there fairly often. Our home's in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where friends and family are. But we still have many friends up in Buffalo, and I do especially have many friends up in Buffalo and many friends that feel like family up in Buffalo. So it's a special place and a second home for me.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have, from a player or now from a broadcasting commentator side of things, do you have a couple of guys that you kind of had as mentors or that you could go and reach out to kind of for solid advice if you ever needed a pick-me-up kind of thing? I know you're a really solid guy with a big faith and you have a higher energy about yourself anyway. But everyone's human. So maybe if you needed a pick-me-up or needed just kind of a piece of advice, did you make those relationships in Buffalo or elsewhere? And then maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when I was playing, blessed to have a ton of good coaches and phenomenal teammates. When I first got there, Jeff Hangardner was on our offensive line, kind of one step ahead of me. He was on his second contract. So looked up to him, took advice from him, from Kyle, and many of the other veterans on the team. And then later in my career, we brought in Richie Incognito, who's older than me. And, we had a great relationship there. And, I learned a lot from him as well. And then transitioning into broadcasting, there's been so many people that have helped me along the way and have given me advice. Kirk Herbstreit's an Ohio guy. I've known him for a long time. He's given me advice throughout my time. Ian Rappaport helped me find an agent. It's amazing when you treat people right when you're a player, how when you then transition out, there's so many people looking to take care of you, even if you weren't doing it for the sole reason of trying to make a connection in the broadcast industry, just treating people right along the way. Probably in any industry helps you out later down the road.
Yeah, it doesn't cost anything to be nice to someone, right? So I
No doubt.
appreciate that. Like I appreciate your time here today on the Built in Buffalo Network. This is an episode of One on One here with Eric Wood. Yeah, Eric. So let's talk a little bit about the Bills' offensive line this year. 5 starters, the same 5 every game. And you talked a little bit about this with Mitch Morse on your show, Centered with Eric Wood podcast, and just how incredible of a season did this offensive line have? Having that continuity and being able to start the same 5 each week.
They had a great season. I thought this was the best offensive line of this Josh Allen era, and probably, even though I was part of one of them, probably the entire Sean McDermott era. This offensive line played great this year. They stayed healthy. Part of that is because, and me and Mitch talked about it on the Saturday Night Buffalo podcast, part of it's the way Cromer teaches and the way Aaron Cromer is able to get the guys to, you're not necessarily trying to pancake someone on every play because, one, in today's NFL, that's generally going to be a hold. And two, you're often putting your own guys in the line of fire when you're throwing guys on the ground. And so a lot of it's position blocking. And then there's times where you have a double team and you're trying to move a guy up the field. There's times you're pulling and you see Deion Dawkins go smash a guy. Like, there's a time and a place for all of that. But in pass protection, a lot of times they're not trying to throw guys to the ground, which can often lead to ankle sprains and whatnot. And so having the same offensive line the entire year is a huge advantage. There's so much continuity that needs to take place that the fact that they were all able to work together the entire season made a big difference. And, they had the least amount of sacks in the NFL at one point, and I believe it made it through the end of the season. James Cook was top 2 in the NFL in yards before contact, which we claim as an offensive line stat. I know part of that's running back vision and scheme and play calling, but there's only so many stats that we can kind of hang our hat on as an offensive line. So, sack percentage, yards before contact, they were, top 2 or 3 in the NFL in those categories. So statistically, they played well. And then, when you turn on the film, those guys were playing at a high level.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, young guard. I know Cyrus Torrance made a very quick adjustment and step up. It was great to see him play. The Connor McGovern addition was also a big one for the Bills this season, and then growing with Mitch Morse, Spencer Brown, and Deion Dawkins, who are here. I think that that continuity. How big? I heard you say that the center missing the game doesn't move the line much. I don't remember which show I was watching you on. Maybe it was your show with Josh Reed, but still, how big of a position is center with having that continuity and having the guys kind of, he gets everyone set right in the calls, and Josh Allen obviously does a great job of that for the most part too. But how big of a role does the center play in getting everyone kind of on their P's and Q's?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, it kind of depends on the quarterback. That's why I was asking Mitch Morse, because I never played with Josh Allen. I never played under Ken Dorsey or Joe Brady or these guys. So I was wondering how much responsibility the center has at the line of scrimmage in their offense, because it depends offense to offense. But generally, you're making all the offensive line calls up front, just so we know we're all on the same page. Generally, they're not 100% needed, but when you have the most valuable asset in the organization behind you, nobody can be wrong. You cannot let free hitters come back at the quarterback. And when there are free hitters, Josh generally knows it, because he knows that guy's not accounted for by the offensive line within the scheme. And so generally the center is setting the protections. He's setting the run schemes based upon where the Mike linebacker is, or who we call the Mike linebacker on the play. It's not necessarily who has that title on the roster. And so that often falls in the center. And and I say that the center doesn't often move a point spread in a game, but it could if they didn't have a capable backup. If Mitch Morse goes out and Ryan Bates comes in, who has experience in this offense, it probably doesn't move the line, even though it maybe should move it a hair. It probably doesn't. And centers often have humility as well. So maybe it could in some instances, but you take an offense like the Dolphins, it's all timing based, and they come to Buffalo that first time this year in week 4, and they're playing with a backup center for the first time that season, and it's all off a silent count. Well, now if the timing's not perfect, if the snaps aren't hitting Tua right and the belt buckle are just above it each time, well, that makes a big difference in a timing-based offense. So, you often don't notice the center on a play until he starts screwing up, until it's the national championship or the semifinals for the national championship in college, and Alabama's center starts popping him on the ground every other play. Then the center's completely noticed.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned guys like Bates, and then David Edwards this year was big. Vandemark maybe got a little bit of work here and there. How big are those guys for that offensive line unit? Like, how important to the unit is it to make sure that you trust, like, even if you aren't able to go, that the guy behind you is ready?
Well, it's so rare that you have a season like this year where all 5 starters start all 17 games and then the 2 playoff games. It's a rare thing in the NFL. Generally, someone's going to get dinged up throughout the season and at least miss a game. So then having capable backups that can come in becomes vital. Well, there has been a lack of offensive line depth in the NFL over the last maybe 5 to 10 years. A lot of it's because there's not as many padded practices in the NFL anymore. So the development's not there. It's also these college offenses become so much of the spread nature, and it doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL, so they can't transition as fast in there. There's a number of reasons for that. And so for the Bills to have as many solid backups as they do is a luxury. And Brandon Beane's been able to identify and stockpile these guys, and oftentimes he'll flip one of them for a draft pick or 2 at the end of training camp, because other teams around the league are sitting there looking at the Bills' offensive line depth and they're coveting some of those assets.
Yeah, I guess, do you think that it's does it have much importance, or how much importance do you think it is to try to get a guy like David Edwards re-signed and back to this unit this year? Because everyone else is basically going to come back, and David Edwards is the one free agent out there. So in your mind, is it something, do you think that he may go try to get a starting gig or another bigger role somewhere? Or do you think it'd be, there's a chance the Bills can get him back and have him as their kind of 6th offensive lineman?
He may, he may have the opportunity to go somewhere and play, but I know that he has experience with Kromer in the past. And so he may want to stay and play under Aaron and say, look, it's rare that, I got a bunch of reps as that 6th offensive lineman, that tight end coming in. And it's rare that, that middle 3 stays healthy the entire season. So I likely have the opportunity to play next year. And maybe I can go compete with a, Connor McGovern in a year or 2, or however that shakes out. And that's probably silly to say, considering, both those guard spots were a high draft pick in your top free agent you brought in last year. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see him try and go find more money elsewhere, but it also wouldn't surprise me one bit to see him back in Buffalo and play a similar role that he played this year, understanding that his opportunity can likely be called this year because of injury, because it'd be extremely rare to have 2 seasons in a row like the Bills had this year with a completely healthy offensive line.
36 straight games of the same 5, probably not going to happen, right? So, that's a good point. I'm going to just pull up. We do have one comment here that brings up a good question, and our guy, he's a built-in Buffalo guy as well. But he says, "Who's a player you hated to play, and then maybe a player you would like to see on the schedule?" And okay, I'll have my hands full this week.
Yeah, so it's funny. And look, all the big name defensive tackles and DNs, those guys are all good. I mean, J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald and those guys, they're household names for a reason. It is what it is. But everyone knows about them. So if you get beat by them, it's not that big of a deal. For me, I remember playing a guy named Damon Harrison. He ended up becoming the highest paid nose guard in the league. But when he was playing for the Jets, initially, he was on their practice squad the year before. We had no tape on him. And that guy was a handful. I mean, he was 6'3", 350 pounds, enough wiggle that he could potentially make you look bad in pass pro, and you weren't going to move him in the run game. But he was a young, hungry, undrafted guy. I think he played at, I want to say Hampton, but that could have been another guy. Yeah, look that. Have the producers look that one up for us. But just kidding. But anyways, Damon Harrison, especially early in his career when we didn't have any film on him, that was one of the guys where I was like, okay, I have my hands full this week, and he's not the household name where like people are expecting you to have your hands full.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great answer. Cool. Yeah, I guess those were the questions I had for the Bills part of it, but I wanted to get a little bit of personal stuff with you. What do you got going on this offseason that you're most excited about?
That's a great question. We got some family trips coming up, and I stay pretty busy during the season, calling the games on the weekends, which requires a good amount of travel because I'm always commuting from Louisville. And then during the week, a number of media appearances and some work for the Bills, whether it's the Sean McDermott Show or One Bills Live or WGR hits and whatnot. So stay pretty busy during the season. So looking forward to some family time. We have winter break for the kids coming up, so we'll get down to Florida for, I believe, 5 nights coming up. Towards the end of next week, it'll start, and a couple golf trips, and excited to dig in on this Saturday on Buffalo podcast and have some fun with it. And, I have my What's Next with Eric Wood podcast still, but a lot of the biggest guests were the Bills guests. And so, give the people what they want and start a Bills podcast, and looking to expand on that podcast and do some in-person events next year during the season and have some fun with it. And look, Bills Mafia has been so great to me. The more I get to be around them, give them some content, during the season, during the off season, throughout the week, and then also be able to do some fun experiences with them. I think we could have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm interested to see where you go with that. We're also, out in the community a lot here in Buffalo, so I'm excited to see your Centered on Buffalo podcast grow. That's something I like to tune into personally. I played in high school and growing up on the offensive line at Garden Center. So I've followed a lot of, guys like yourself who have been interior offensive linemen. That's kind of the vibe I get. They get to kind of jive with what they put out. Guys like Taylor Lewan now doing a lot of stuff in podcasting, things like that. So it's awesome to see you guys and really get a glimpse into kind of what the life is as a professional and things like that. So really appreciate that. And then let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Evan Wood Fund. Tell us how we can get involved and what's coming up for that. You said you have a thing this weekend in Buffalo. Is that part of the Evan Wood Fund, or is that separate? Or
there's a dinner I'm going to Saturday night from an auction winner from the Flights and Bites event. Someone purchased a dinner at Hutch's, so I'll be going to dinner with them on Saturday night. And the Evan Wood Fund's been a special thing to have built. And it started as the Eric Wood Foundation. Now it's the Evan Wood Fund under Oshad Children's Hospital, named after my little brother who passed when he was 11 years old, who was born with severe cerebral palsy. And so for us to be able to serve this community of families and their children, the sick children in the Western New York area, has been great to be a part of. And someone told me a long time ago to be generous with those communities that helped you accumulate money along the way. Well, I never had any money in my life before I got to Buffalo, and that's the community that supports the team that allowed us to have some financial freedom now. So I want to pour into that community. Every dollar stays in Western New York, and by being a fund under a hospital, we don't have big overhead, and so 99% of that money that you're donating goes right to the kids. And I love to say 100%, but there's generally some tab that I miss or someone misses along the way, whether it's, apparel for a golf tournament or something where we miss that. But it's been great to be a part of, including the COVID year. In the last 5 years, raised over $1.2 million. And that's with having one event a year. And so that's our Flights and Bites event in the fall. So be on the lookout for that. Look out for sponsorships there. I believe this year it's grown so much that it'll just be the sponsors and their guests. So everyone listening in, if you would love to be a sponsor for the event, we would absolutely love to have you. It's an awesome night. It's a special night. And those that come often want to come back. But just have caught a lot of fulfillment from keeping that going over the years here.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, I think I've asked you all the questions I have for today, Eric. Do you have any questions for me?
What's your hopes for the Bills early in the draft?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because there was one mock draft that had him taking a center round one, right? Which is kind of funny. And everyone's on the wide receiver train, so I think I'd like to join, the guys on that. I think they need it, but I don't know that the board's going to shake out necessarily to allow them to do that. And what the value is going to look like at the end of the first round. That's the tough part. So they're going to have to get creative with it, I think. I know Beane's aggressive, and my assumption is that he'll move up again somehow, some way, and get the guy that they want, that they have their first round grade on, in the early 20s, probably. That's seemingly their MO, and I'm just kind of history repeats itself. So I really like to see them bring in a really big stud wide receiver in the first round and kind of get the offense bolstered on the outside, because I think that the more they stretch the outside of the field, the better. I mean, look, they have Kincaid and Shakir who are great, and they're going to start using the middle of the field. I feel like under this Joe Brady scheme, I think they need to, in my opinion. But obviously, Diggs can go anywhere you want him to go, or anywhere he wants to go, being such a technical route runner. So just that one guy, obviously, Gabe Davis probably not going to return. So that's where I look. But I do think that, I've said this on my podcast, the Buffalo Blitz on Tuesdays, that we do need to maybe think about a center, because we do have Mitch Morse on the last year of his deal coming up, I believe, and then Bates maybe has a year or two left. But I'm not sure what his situation is going to be beyond that. So I just think it'd be good this year to invest and see if they can get a young center they can kind of bring in and develop in the system.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. And people ask me that question often, and I'm like, well, let's see how free agency shakes out. But the Bills aren't going to be able to make big moves in free agency, so we can kind of play this draft game a little bit earlier than we normally could, because normally you're like, well, until free agency's over, it's hard to say, because you can kind of fill holes as need be. But we're aligned there. I mean, if you got a big time receiver that you can get in the first round, the way the NFL's built nowadays, if you can have two guys that are studs on the outside, it's a monster weapon. It's a big time weapon. And then you add Shakir in the slot and Kincaid at tight end and his catching ability, and even Dawson Knox.
Yep.
Now you're rolling into the season thinking, okay, this is probably the top offense in the league.
And Joe Brady loves to use the running backs too, so you can't exclude James Cook in that offense with the passing game. I think that even guys like Ty Johnson had some success. So maybe drafting in the 4th or 5th round a running back this year too would be nice to kind of complete that room. And we'll probably add a veteran running back as well from free agency. But again, without the money, knowing what the money is going to look like to spend, is there any one prospect in this draft that have you done a lot of draft research? And is there any one guy that you're kind of looking at, like, hey, this guy might be a rare, either maybe a surprise or a rare find, maybe later in the draft, or something that you can name or just throw out?
No, and I wish I could. This is about the least amount of college football I've watched in my life. Now, the Louisville Cardinals had a good season. I watched all of their games, but man, it's tough nowadays with the transfers and everything, because there's so much turnover year to year that, it's hard to casually watch a game thinking, oh, okay, how's this player from last year? Oh, no, he's at Alabama now, or he's at Georgia now. And so, no, I don't. I wish I did.
Yeah, I think I'm going to benefit from that this year as being a Syracuse fan. I hope that, Brown coming up from Georgia and bringing a lot of recruits, and, getting the transfer from Ohio State there as well. I think Syracuse is looking to be a pretty formidable team, and hopefully can beat out Louisville this year. I know that they haven't had the best of luck with them. When Lamar was there, I think Syracuse did beat Louisville in the Dome. So that was pretty special thing. Pretty cool. But yeah, with that, we're hitting about our half-hour mark here, Eric. So I just want to say thank you. Tell everyone all the places they can find you and where to kind of follow you along.
Yeah, I appreciate being on with you, Lance. I'm at ewood70 on Twitter and Instagram. And then check out my Centered on Buffalo podcast. We have a lot of fun on that one. I think everyone will enjoy it.
Yeah, I always enjoy it. And as always, go Bills. And thanks so much for your time, Eric.
Yep, go Bills.